for joining us at the Data Science for Social Good conference. This is our session chair, Alex Engler. He's going to start now. Thank you all. If you could please take your seats.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Can you guys hear me in the back? Is the mic working well enough? Great. Okay. Whenever we get a chance, we could maybe close one of those doors. Hey, how are you? I'm Alex Engler. I'm the session chair for this. I've never been a session chair before, and so I've decided that means I get to talk about the topic for a minute. And I don't know enough to know if that's not true. So I run and teach in the Computational Analysis and Public Policy program at the University of Chicago. I was lucky enough to recently see a wonderful keynote by Stefan Verholtz. He runs the New York University's GovLab, speaking sort of to this topic, to private sector and data science efforts for social good. He was specifically talking about the rising trend of private data in the public sector and how important that is. It really is a sort of fundamental change that we're just grappling with for the first time, and so they have an upcoming report. I encourage you to go look at it, specifically talking about issues that we all know about, that the public sector is not creating as much new data as it used to. Surveys are expensive and less frequent. We need to start augmenting them with online data sources and private data sources to be able to say new things about public policy research and social science. And that work, there was the first systemic report. I think they looked at 100 examples of private data use in the public sector, and actually started to think about frameworks and sort of a systemic approach to this rather than an ad hoc approach. How can we do this in a meaningful, ethical, safe way going forward? And to long term, as we know, we sort of need to start integrating private data sources into our public good efforts. So in terms of big picture framing, if that's of interest to you, I encourage you to go look at that. In a year where we may not have a fully funded census, it's hard, right, not to take this issue seriously. And so I'm really excited that we have four wonderful experts in this topic on starting to integrate private efforts for social good with data science. And we're going to start with Erek Dyskant. And he is the co-founder of BlueLabs, and before that he was the tech lead for geospatial data analysis at Obama for America. He's going to talk about using data to make government services intuitive and engaging. Everybody, Erek Dyskant.
Hey, good to meet you all. So BlueLabs is a data science consultancy. We focus on encouraging, nudging people towards changing behavior. Specifically, I lead our Healthcaregov team. We've been working with Healthcaregov for about the last 4 years, and our team's mandate is to encourage people who started the process of enrolling to finish, to pick the plan that best meets their needs, and to remain members as long as it improves their health, and to use their health insurance to become healthier and receive healthcare. So it's a broad mandate for a relatively small team, depending on the season, 8 to 12 people. So really, there's a few areas that we focused on. First of all, the most intuitive way to pull people back into the process is to contact them. So email, SMS, digital ad retargeting. Those means we aggressively A/B test. So over the last 4 years that we've been on the program, we've run well over 1,000 content A/B tests. There's a few areas that there's a few lessons if you distill all those for things that continually win. One of them is that more specific information beats more general information. So as health policy wonks, we were all super excited to tell the world that that you can receive preventive care for zero copay. It turned out to be that message didn't really win A/B tests very frequently. And we brought it up in focus groups, and it was sort of, we already know that, it feels like an advertisement. What people really wanted to know is the plans that are available in their area, what they're going to cost, what other people are doing in their area. So social proof works, sort of information overload didn't work. The other thing that we found with our audience was that sort of fashion-forward design didn't really work. So when you saw, we got a few % lift by removing flat design from our content and putting call to actions that look like buttons. What that gets to is that, that I have knowledge of private sector A/B testing campaigns that went the other way, that, that people really wanted to see like modern looking design. And that gets to that there's beauty and non-replicability, that we have a population that meets specific needs and our innovation is to test everything and go to the social science research to have ideas for what to test, but not take it as gospel. So then the other piece is just sort of clear and concise communication, but it still feels like it's from the government. So so using the HHS logo, using the Healthcaregov brand, not throwing 1,000 exceptions into our language, but also like celebrity testimonials and that sort of thing just tend to not be the federal government's voice, even though they work great for selling airline tickets or for even signing people up for insurance through your insurance company. So then the second piece that we can do is, okay, email, SMS, there's a few channels that are effectively free. Then there's a bunch of channels that have marginal cost per enrollee. So mail, live phone calls, even robodials to some extent at our scale start to have cost. So for those we run predictive models. We run randomized trials. We figure out who it is who's likely to be moved by messaging. What we tend to find, what we learn really quickly, is that clickstream data is key for that. So there's data in your system of record. How many people are on the application, zip code, ages, where they live, all that type of information is valuable in models. What turned out to be way more valuable is somebody who logged into the website, ran into 3 validation errors, bounced and didn't come back. Their application date didn't change, or their modification date didn't change because they didn't actually update their application, but they made an effort to log in. They really wanted healthcare, clearly, because they put significant effort, and web wasn't the right medium for that user. So we started looking around for basically what are all the possible failed engagements. So one of them is show up at the website, don't log in, leave. That's that you could find it through a cookie, but that's not something we do. Second is is log into go to the website, enter the wrong password 15 times and leave. Turns out, a cybersecurity person would tell you, oh, that's a brute force attack, which sometimes it is, but most of the time it's that you log into healthcare.gov once a year. The expected thing is that you forget your password. So how do we use the other resources to reach into the internet, pull those folks back into the process in a way that's targeted and uses our limited resources for where do we find people who are having problems and use those for, hey, come on over to in-person assistant, schedule an appointment, we can help you out in person, sort of a thing. So then that leaves sort of just interesting data pipelining questions of basically, as an online property, what you're looking for is all of the ways that people are not successful at using your service, rather than the ways that people, rather than sort of the traditional, here's what's in the database, let's start there. So then that ends up actually creating some value for longer term predictive modeling. So okay, so the things that I just described are all individual level interventions. It turns out that over a longer term, it gets really important to know just, how many people do we expect next year. Turns out that things like how many people logged in yesterday, how many people have logged in the last 30 days, extremely predictive for retention as well as just general new user interest. So sort of, the start at the individual, then go back and build that up and say, what sorts of long-term strategy things can you learn, ends up sort of being the mantra that our team has built the practice around. This last open enrollment period, about 57% of the people who were new applications had actually been to the website in previous years. So what that tells us is that our population is actually sort of much more dynamic than the ways that we've looked at it in the past. So, so just generally speaking, people who come back may have had insurance before, dropped out, maybe at the income threshold between Medicaid and the exchange. So it's how do we develop a really long-term relationship with consumers with the expectation that they move in and out of the program based on their employment and other program eligibility. The trend that we're seeing, that we saw last year and that is expanding, is that cities are getting expensive for our consumers. So generally our consumers are moving from urban cores into suburban areas. At the same time, mobile data plans have gone down in cost. So, so when we started the program, it cost about $60, $70, $80 a month for mobile broadband. Now in urban and suburban areas, they're down to about $30 a month. Meanwhile, it's harder for our citizens to get to in-person locations. So what we really have to look at is how do we make this program and other programs mobile first, because those two trends make it so that mobile is really, not for every consumer, but for many of our consumers, the best way to reach our service. Are we out on time?
We've got another minute, yeah.
Should I take a few questions?
How are you being affected by the reduction in funding for these kinds of programs and the general uncertainty in the markets?
So, so uncertainty in the markets is so first of all, it's in the news that less money is being spent on media programs to pull people in. We have two competing theories. One of them is that direct response will have a larger impact because it's a larger share of the overall way that Healthcaregov communicates with consumers. The other theory is that it'll have a smaller impact because the people who are coming in are super motivated and didn't need to be pulled in by TV or radio or digital. So it's an open question that we won't fully know till after this open enrollment period.
One more question? Anybody?
Hi, thank you. So what have your early results looked like, or what have your results looked like as you've done your A/B testing?
So from an A/B testing perspective, we've just run so many that I hope I did a good job of summarizing the trends. Some things are significant, some aren't. We've had the luxury of working with incredibly good writing teams, so much of the content that goes out is really good. And then it's a matter of what is it that pops, and I hope I summarized those well. We also had a longitudinal experiment, so so we had of the 9-point-something million people who were enrolled at the end of last open enrollment period, about 1 million of them took action as a result of receiving direct response. So that puts it at a little bit at sort of a critical part of the program rather than a nice to have part of the program. Just a very significant percentage of the people would not have taken action if we weren't sort of reaching into the internet and reminding them about the deadline and providing proactive information to them.
To what extent do you bring in human component to this? Because I know it's really easy to stand behind a data set and just look at some of the trends you're seeing, but do you guys also go out and interview maybe some users or users that have had problems signing up?
So there's a focus group program that the government does, go out and run focus groups. That's, for example, where we learned, not surprisingly, but it was helpful to hear it from people, that that most people thought that health insurance is more expensive than it is. which encouraged us to, to provide individual level premium amounts. To say, these are the plans available to you, and these are what they cost. The other area that we found is just specific areas within the user experience. So, for example, many people who use healthcare.gov are immigrants and may not know that, month, day, year versus day, month, year. So then that gave us the idea of looking at the clickstream data to figure out at an individual level, are people confusing that, and what can we do to reach out to them?
Okay, I gotta cut it off there. Everyone, Erek, Dyskant, thanks so much. Okay, next up we have Kenth Engø-Monsen. Kenth is a senior data scientist at Telenor Research, which is a research center and firm aimed at the telecom industry. He has 15 years of experience in the field, and he's going to be talking about a case study of mobility and dengue in Pakistan.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. A few words about my company first. First of all, I come from Norway and work for a telecommunication company called Telenor. And I would claim that, as seen here from the US, it's kind of one of the hidden secrets of Norway. And we have like 200 million customers, but it's mainly in the Nordics, Eastern Europe, and in Asia. A few years ago, we actually went to a conference and we bumped into some academics from Harvard. And when they realized that I came from a company that was running a mobile operator in Pakistan, they were asking us, wow, isn't it a good idea to actually utilize that data for figuring out how this dengue fever is spreading through Pakistan? And so it was kind of a chance interaction or a random interaction at a conference that led to this project. So now I'm just going to briefly go through this. So if you roll one, that was a little bit, yeah, dengue transmission. This is about mosquitoes and vector-borne diseases. And these mosquitoes are then spreading a dengue virus from one human to the next. But if you look at the spread of these vector-borne diseases over long distances, it is the humans, infected humans, that carry the virus with them. So that was why these epidemiologists at Harvard came to me and asked, can you actually map out the mobility patterns or travel patterns of the people in Pakistan so that we can see if we can use that in some sensible way for the modeling. So that was, that's the insight here, that mosquitoes, they don't travel or fly longer than 50 meters in their lifetime. But actually humans, we travel hundreds and thousands of miles. So, next please. This is then an example of the kind of data that is collected whenever you use the phone. You probably know all this, but whenever you use your phone, it's a database entry with the telco operator that tells us who you're calling, when you're doing it, what kind of interaction it is, at what cell tower you're connected, etc., etc. And actually some people, they get scared when I tell them that, because, ooh, do you know all that? But when you think about it, in order to actually deliver the service, we need to know all this data. So what's interesting here is then the location data. We basically know the location in real time of all our customers. And that kind of information, of aggregating that up in an anonymized way, was then the ambition of this project. Next, please. So how do we do it? We don't focus on the individuals. We actually need to sum up. If this is one zip code, then we count up all individuals traveling from this zip code area and up to this zip code area. So, you know, it's saying that there was 378 people traveling up, and it was 5,389 going the other way. So, you know, it's really fully anonymized, and it's not the data of the individual that is actually interesting here, because we had to pair this data with then the epidemiological data, and you had to find the right granularity of geography in order to connect up data. And really, you don't know exactly when and where you actually get bitten by the mosquito. So, you know, we had to aggregate up. So this is then the principle of, so any mobile operator can basically map out the flows of travel in the country. Next, please. Yeah. And this is how it looks like when we visualize it. Down here is Karachi, the main financial city of Pakistan, and it's very well connected to the other parts of Pakistan. And it's also overlaid here the susceptibility or the intensity of the virus. And actually the outcome at the end of the day are maps when we do this. Because it's the Ministry of Health that ideally wants to use this. Okay. And can you scroll on? Yeah. And what they want to do is assess the risk. Where will dengue fever pop up? And you know, doing it the old way, it was an inaccurate, erroneous map, actually. It was just plain out wrong. So, you know, that means that when they're planning their efforts, they don't have that much resources. You know, they spend it on the wrong areas and the wrong timings. So what the mobility data was able then to do was to give a much, much sharper prediction in terms of geography, and also in terms of week when the virus would be introduced to an area. So, you know, that can help then the Ministry of Health in doing better predictions and resource allocations, especially in a country like Pakistan. Okay, so what were some of the learnings? I was a little bit worried about saying that it's not only about the data at a conference like this, but still, I actually want to say, because it was a problem getting the case data. It was a huge challenge actually handling all the mobility data, and we had to figure out solutions for that. But also at the end of the day, it's how does these results actually impact others? Who is actually going to start acting upon these insights? So, you know, action from the insight, that is very important. And for some people, these insights can mean that, you know, maybe they lose their job or things like that. So there will be resistance in the organizations when you actually are going to implement things like this. So that was kind of a key learning. Also, collaboration was extremely important for us, because I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm just a simple mathematician actually. So, you know, I learned a lot about vector-borne diseases by talking to the experts at Harvard. So even though I consider myself a data scientist, you know, there are limits to what I can do. And there is a domain expertise that is also needed in order to apply this in a good way. And we had great challenges on privacy and security, but I think we rendered that in a good way by making sure that all the data was fully anonymized. So then I have 2 minutes for questions, if there are any. Oh, we only have 2 minutes.
So I'm curious, when I looked at the map and you showed where people go,
Yeah.
Are there places where there aren't any cell towers and so you didn't have data? And if so, did you extrapolate out to what Dengue was going to do in those areas?
That's a very good question. Yeah, the density of cell towers is, you know, it varies across the country, but it's most cell towers where there are most people in a way. So, but out in the rural areas, there are some few cell towers, but not as many as in the cities. So, you know, the predictions might not be as accurate, or they will be at a lower accuracy.
One more.
My question is with regards to the anonymity of the data. In your situation, you were able to make that possible, but what I would like to find out is in a country where the resources are not available to make this possible, exposing or using data this way, how can you keep government from laying hands on data that is supposed to be sensitive? Because in certain countries where there's lots of unrest, data like this could go a long way to help, but it could also be very dangerous in the hands of the wrong people. So in an agenda to push the advent of data science and what you can do in a country, how do you keep that government from using it the wrong way? Is there anything that the telecommunications company can do, or basically?
That's a very tough question, actually, because you know, I worked for the mobile operator, and the dynamics between the mobile operator and the government is that the government issues a license for the mobile operator to actually operate. So the thing is that if I don't behave as a mobile operator, then the government can take away our license. So, you know, we really have an incentive to behave. But the problem of governments that don't behave, you know, I don't think the mobile operator is actually able to solve that directly. But at least in Telenor, we're very, very cautious on privacy and how we utilize data sets. So, you know, we try to have the necessary transparency on how we use data. And transparency is important in these cases.
We gotta call it there for now, but you can find them after. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Lindsay Relihan, who is a PhD student in applied economics at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also a PhD research fellow at the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute, and recently won what looks to me to be a very prestigious prize, the Benjamin H. Stevens Graduate Fellowship in Regional Science. This is for some of the work she'll talk about now, which is in online retail and how it affects local offline communities. Or close to. It's not that research, it's other research, it's better research.
Sorry, the online research is my job market research. This is the work I've been doing in collaboration with the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute. Is there a clicker, or I just wait for you? Great. Test this out. There we go. Hi, thanks for having me, first of all. A little bit first about the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute. It's a new outfit, only about 3 years old, that is a think tank set up and funded by the bank in order to utilize the absolute amazing data that the bank has access to through its commercial lines of business in order to provide some unique insights and analysis into economic phenomena that are really important for the public good. So for that reason, we're really a public-facing institution. We're really concerned with filling the gaps in the current data analysis that's available to local decision makers to make good public policy. And the research agenda that we build is really based on that need that we discover through our own research and in discussions with those local decision makers, in addition to our own interests in what the data is really built for, uniquely as compared to other outside data sets. So we don't take requests from inside the bank or provide analysis that's just for the bank. It's everything we do is public facing. And who we are, we're about 40 full-time employees located at offices in DC and New York. Mostly we come from social science and data science backgrounds. And in addition to those full-time employees, we have collaborations with academics like myself that bring in extra expertise in particular areas of interest for the Institute. Yeah, so in the last 3 years since we've started, we've done a lot of great research. In the beginning, we were mostly just trying to figure out how to compile all the massive data sets that are available through the bank and build them into the various assets that can be used to actually analyze the kinds of questions that we're interested in as part of our agenda. Some of these you might have seen floating around. Our consumer team has looked in the last 3 years at consumer volatility and how that impacts household finances, how the labor market and the gig economy is developing, and then my team in particular, which looks at local consumer commerce, has been really focused on trying to measure neighborhood economic activity at fine-grained levels and at greater frequency than is currently available through other kinds of data sets like the census. And as part of that agenda is our Going the Distance brief, which I led as part of my research collaboration with the Institute, trying to understand the access consumers have to everyday goods in their local offline economies. So there's a growing recognition of the importance of retail access to resident well-being in different cities. The geographic distribution of stores around you really determines a lot of the everyday goods that you have access to, and the distance costs you pay to reach them can be really impactful on that welfare. You might have been familiar with some of these issues around the discussion of food deserts, different neighborhoods having access to grocery stores at affordable prices to those residents. But food is not the only thing that's important for consumers to be close to. They buy a much more wide variety of products and services, and that full slate of their consumption portfolio is really important in their access to that in measuring and improving consumer welfare. So that's something that we can do with our data, which is pretty unique. The card transaction data that we have access to when you swipe your card, it shows up in our data set, can tell us what kinds of products and services you're actually spending on, and we know where you live and the zip code of the merchant at which you made that swipe, so we can measure those distances from you using this like a centroid to centroid measure. In this space, something that we're able to do that is sort of limited in the current research is apply much more detailed and sophisticated measures of access than what's currently available. You might be familiar with the 20-minute neighborhood concept, which is pretty commonly used by public officials. Basically just indicators of whether or not grocery stores or other local public amenities are available in a 20-minute walking zone of a different customer's or resident's home. But what's not the most important thing for a resident in a particular neighborhood is not whether or not there's a grocery store there, but whether or not there's a grocery store that they actually want to visit and make transactions at. It's that distance that's relevant for their access. So what we can do that's very unique is measure the distances that consumers are actually facing for the grocery stores that they want to go visit and make purchases at. And not just the grocery stores, but the other products and services, food, fuel, clothing, etc. These everyday goods that consumers face a lot of distance costs to access. So the point of this research is a very basic first step to get some stylized facts about retail access across these different products and how far consumers are actually traveling from their homes to make those purchases. And I'm going to be measuring the median transaction distance for different consumers in different zip codes, in particular across Detroit and New York as a first pass, because they have very different retail environments and different socioeconomics. So as you might guess, there's a lot of variation between different zip codes in the cities in how far the residents on average are traveling to visit different merchants. So the blue here is going to be Detroit, and then New York is in the orange. And the distance, which is lighter, if you're traveling less distance, is generally clustered around the central business district, but there's even within those different bands of distance from that central area, there's still a lot of wide variation. Now, there's not only variation across zip codes, but across the different product types that consumers are making purchases at. So here we have, again, Detroit and New York, and the ranking of the distances that they travel for different products. The ranking is pretty much one-for-one across New York and Detroit as far as how far they go for different products, with clothing being the farthest distances that people travel, and pharmacies being the least far away from their home zip codes. This sort of gives you a sense of how important it is to measure not just access to food, but access to all of these products, because some of these distances can be quite substantial. In addition, you might notice that the distances traveled by residents in New York are higher for every product category than those traveled by customers in New York. And that's something that you can see when you look across the distribution of the zip codes in the 2 different cities. This is the start of our, toward the start of our data set in the first quarter of 2013, and the distribution of average median distance travel to the merchants at which the customers transact. In general, the distribution for Detroit sits to the right of the distribution for New York. The average in Detroit is 2.2 miles traveled, or 2.2 miles away from the customer's home zip code, and in New York, slightly less at 2 miles. And you'll also notice that there's this big bulge for the Detroit metropolitan area, where there's a cluster of zip codes where the customers in general are traveling much farther. Then, 3 years later in our data, we see both distributions move to the left. Sorry, I don't want to block anything. And in particular, you see this cluster here for Detroit sort of like melt away. And the average actually fell farther in Detroit than it did in New York, by about 10%, which is fairly substantial. These are really hard numbers to get to move. They require consumers to both switch to purchasing items at different merchants, and for new merchants to actually open up, new stores to open up that are closer to consumers to move that number. Okay, so then another important finding we had from our research was that these gains to consumers were not evenly distributed across different socioeconomics. This is just calling out income here. You can see that in Detroit, over those 3-year period, it was actually these middle income consumers making between $41,000 and $60,000 a year that saw the greatest gains in that access. Whereas in New York, it was actually the very lowest income consumers that were getting the greatest gains. This is generally a positive trend if you're thinking about the importance of accessibility in terms of economic inequality. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of some of the findings that I thought were most interesting. And going forward, we're going to try and make this a more regularly updated thing, and something that we can provide to local public officials on a regular basis to understand how their local communities are evolving. And we're going to try to push out in the next couple of years even greater granularity for the data towards like the census block, potentially granularity that you just actually download from the website and analyze and use and incorporate into other analysis. And an additional area of interest for us is moving into online commerce for my team, understanding how online commerce is transforming local economies. And in particular, we're interested in how these two areas intersect. So if you think that online commerce should be most valuable to consumers who travel large distances to visit offline stores, the gains from online commerce might not be evenly distributed across space, for example. So that's where we're heading in the future. A minute for questions?
Yeah, if we're going to do one real quick.
All right, I saw you go first, so go ahead.
I was just curious, how do you deal with like the fact that a lot of people in these communities probably don't have credit cards or bank accounts or things like that? So how do you deal with kind of like the cash economies?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually. It's something that we obsess over trying to accurately measure these trends. So the data that my team used comes primarily from 15 cities where JPMorgan Chase has a huge footprint. And so we have customers across the huge range of the socioeconomic spectrum, and special products that are specifically targeted towards sort of low-income, generally unbanked customers. So we generally find that our demographics line up pretty well with existing population surveys. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Sorry to cut that one a little short for questions. That was Lindsey Ron Han. If you have questions, I'm sure she'd love to talk to you after. Great. And our last lightning talk speaker is Athina Kanioura, who's the Global Data Science Lead for Accenture Analytics. She's a PhD in Applied Math and Econometrics, and is going to talk today about human capital analytics, specifically looking at a data-driven analysis of maternity leave. Great.
Well, thank you. So, as you said, yeah, why not? What is it? Okay. So I have been working for Accenture for the past 12 years, and when the company gave me this role like 5 years ago to lead the global data science practice, we were thinking of what are those things that we could do to change the way our employees kind of experience the analytics, and how can we use it within our own context. One of the big things that we have put huge focus as a company is diversity. And for us, diversity includes a lot of factors, but more important is women's diversity. So what I had done when I took over this role is trying to see within our female employees, within our analytics female employees, what is the pyramid that we have when it comes to women versus men throughout their career. So back then we had around maybe 25% of the data scientists being women, which we saw as we moved up the ladder, so from analysts to consultants to managers to senior managers to managing directors, this was decreasing very fast. And the main reason of the decrease was because women felt that with the pressure, work-life balance, with the pressure of traveling, with the pressure of work, they were unable to balance family and work. So then we discussed it with the local HR and our global HR lead, and we said, why not kind of kick off a survey, an analysis, starting with a major geography where we have a majority of our employees, but much broader than analytics. So look at all the Accenture employees that we have in the company, starting with the geography that we see the biggest problem being concentrated, and that was India, where we have 130,000 employees. So Accenture is a huge company. We have 425,000 employees globally, out of which almost 1/3 is in India. So if you were to see kind of some of the key facts in terms of labor workforce, there have been huge challenges in India when it comes to the female workforce. Because of cultural reasons, family reasons, financial reasons, religious reasons, and you saw huge diversity when it came to the different states. Some states which were more like Hindu states versus some Muslim states versus some states where the average income was higher versus lower. So what we looked is we took all the internal data, our HR internal data, which spanned back 10 years, it was a combination of structured and non-structured data. We actually, on top of that, we had primary research, so we interviewed around 2,000 ex-Accenture employees, so alumni that had left the company, and there was a set of questions, around 50 questions that we actually put together. So then we combined qualitative and quantitative research to be able to understand what was the key reason that led many of those women leaving the company. So we wanted to reduce attrition of women specifically in India. And the main reason was actually the maternity policy that existed within India, but also within the company. So for some of you that are not familiar, the maternity policy in India was 16 weeks. And you had the option to take the 16 weeks from the moment you gave birth and after, or you had the option to split it before giving birth or after giving birth. So there was a level of negotiation, but you had to take at least 1 month before giving birth, and the rest you could take after giving birth. But of course, 16 weeks is not enough. Right? I'm a mother of 2. I know how hard it is to go back to work after you have had 1 kid, let alone having a second kid, after 3 months or after 4 months. And the women, especially after the interviews, were very transparent. There's no way I can balance work with having children, and in an environment where, the Indian culture expects women to be doing all the housework, to be taking care of the parents, to be taking care of the extended family. So it's not like you have one responsibility. The responsibilities within the household keep accumulating. So we said, okay, what should we do? So we actually, with the analysis of many of those internal and external data, we tried to identify through various optimization techniques what should be this optimal maternity leave period that you should be having, that of course makes sense within the India legislation and framework, local state framework and the national framework, that would allow these women to feel, at least for the beginning, comfortable of coming back within the company. So we said we analyzed various types of data, and these are some of the facts, and we saw that the best period would be at least to go from 16 to 26 weeks. We tested that out with many of the panelists that we've had within the company. We saw that there was a positive uptake in many of our current female employees, but also some of the returning female employees that we entertained this idea. And then we said as a company, okay, based on what we have done, we'll try it out. Accenture will roll it out. We don't care of what other companies are doing. We will make it official within the Accenture framework, and now 26 weeks will be the maternity leave that we will give to our Indian female employees. Because of that, we actually had some actions with some of our main media partners within India, Economic Times, many of our NGOs, and we did some lobbying with many other big companies within India. Some other big consulting firms, but some of our clients as well. So big banks, big insurance companies, big telcos. And we said, okay, this is something that we have tried out. Based on the initial results, we've shown that the attrition actually fell around 30% based on the base that we have had before. So why not you guys try it out in your companies? And we create a lobby, we go back to the government, and we say, based on the latest studies, you can actually change the maternity policy to 26 weeks. And because of that, it's, the Times, made a huge fuss about it because of what we had done. We actually pulled another 20 companies that followed what Accenture had done. And actually, since March, the Parliament passed a bill changing the maternity policy because of the work that we had done. And now in India, you have 26 weeks maternity leave because of the work that Accenture has been doing internally. Due to what we had done in India, we actually also followed the same pattern in other locations. So Latin America, where we have seen many challenges, we did the same study in Argentina, in Chile, in Brazil, in Mexico. Now we do it for Malaysia, some of the ASEAN markets. And last will be obviously Europe, because there you have more flexible maternity leaves. Now, this was key in two terms, and I'll just kind of wrap it up because of that. First of all, it gave the reassurance to our female employees that we as a company are very serious about our women workforce and our mothers. As I said, me being a mother and me wanting in my leadership team to have mothers that feel comfortable to stay in Accenture, you have to give back. As they kind of dedicate a lot of their time to work, they need to feel that the company is actually giving back to them. So on top of this extended maternity leave, what we have done is we have established a part-time program. So any female employee can work part-time for as long as they want. There are no limitations. They can work 50%, 40%, 60% without actually affecting their career development. We have developed a working from home program, especially for the ones that have the possibility to work remotely. You don't have to come to the office. There is remote access. You can work for any type of client with no type of limitations. And additional benefits. So in all the locations, we have daycare. So they can bring their children at work. They can leave them for the duration of their kind of working hours. Plus, on top of that, many other benefits when it comes to health benefits for women and so forth. So, as I said, we are very serious about working mothers. This is the #1 priority for the company, #1 priority for me. And because of that, we've managed now to have within Accenture more than 42% of the workforce being women, with a target in 2020 to be 50%. So, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we've got time for one or two quick questions.
Did you think about testing using randomized controlled trials, or was there a problem rolling out a policy like that in a kind of randomized fashion?
Well, it's a good question. We did think about that. It was a bit challenging in India to implement something like that. We have done it for, I would say, other countries like Argentina, where the sample was more reliable. But in India, we tried to have the experiment slightly more structured. That's why we relied a lot on the internal data, but also a very controlled experiment with almost 2,000 panelists.
So, unfortunately, we do have to cut it short at this point. If you have more, well, first, thank you to to Athina and to all of our speakers. Thanks so much. This is a wonderful panel. Really appreciate it, but we do have to, I think, give up the room. I see Ray in the back looking slightly pensive, and so thanks for coming, everybody. I'm sure the panelists would love to talk to you more if you have questions. Maybe one more round of applause for them and all their.
So we're going to do a little bit of shuffling of people if the panelists want to come up. And yeah, we can